Hello.
Hello there. It's a pleasure. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and you're here in Bristol.
Yeah.
And you've said you've had a bit of experience with Bristol.
Yeah.
You've been in the Old Vic.
Yep. I did a Regency comedy at the Old Vic in the summer of 2000 called A Busy Day.
Yes.
Which was sort of, I was an aristocrat who was a bit of a weirdo, and lovely breeches and a stick, and all the actresses looked amazing in their Empire line dresses, and it transferred into the West End. It was all terribly exciting.
So was this your first West End thing?
Yeah, first and only.
First and only,
okay. But it was very exciting. We got my family to come down to the show, and it was on the Lyric on Shaftesbury Avenue, so it was a big proper West End theatre thing.
Yes.
And, it was great fun. I mean, it's like nothing else. And then I do smaller shows, my own shows, smaller theatres, but doing a West End play was, wow.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Well, that's the pinnacle, isn't it? You know, it's something I suppose everyone aspires to a bit.
I was very lucky. I was sent the script. I knew the casting director, and she said, "Oh, yeah, you'd be good at this," and had a meeting and did it. I mean, didn't have any expectations, and because I mainly do the solo stuff,
Yeah.
it's interesting and exciting to actually work with other actors and go to rehearsals and watch them and pick up little tips of how shows get put together. And I mean, I'd done acting with theatre with casts as a student and amateur dramatics originally as well. But professional, proper stage show with costumes and makeup and wigs and all the camaraderie that you don't really get when you do a solo one-man comedy play.
Yeah, no, it's... So, I mean, do you consider yourself absolutely an actor then?
There is acting in my shows. I mean, I'm telling a story, I'm playing a part, I'm being the narrator, all these things happen to, and his opinions of these things. They're not necessarily mine, Ben Moor's. I mean, a lot of stand-ups have a stand-up character, whereas my pieces, they are theatre because there's lighting effects, there's music effects, there's some props, there's a bit of movement, there's tempo changes, there's mood changes. So they're a piece of sort of storytelling in a theatre environment. And it is acting rather than just simply me sitting on a Jackanory stool and say, well, once upon a time.
Yes, yeah.
And other ones that I've done over the years, I mean, the one you saw was called Coelacanth, and that's very much a linear one-man story. But other ones over the years I've done different characters sometimes, different points of view of the same incident, same event. So they definitely belong in the theatre world as an actor. I mean, that makes I'm not an actor, but I've done bits of other things like films and telly and stuff.
And it's still a process of acting.
Absolutely.
You're playing a role.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
changing the mood.
But most of the time you are a solo performer in that. Is that something because you enjoy that format of being a lone performer on stage, or is it just sort of by chance?
I do enjoy it, and it's. I think you can do interesting and amazing things. Some brilliant people do different things in that format, but it's cheap as well, more than anything. I mean, you know, it's just me running around, and if you're doing an Edinburgh show and even if you're in a double act, you've got to halve everything. And if you're in a sketch show, there's 5 or 6 of you. It's even more. But so it's very. It sounds very selfish, but it's also good economic sense to create an hour of just one person on the stage.
Well, because there is a prevalence of that now. I think it is gaining popularity somewhat, but then it can almost get a bit tiresome in Edinburgh when you're seeing all these. You almost don't know that it's a one-man show until you go there and you see that you're playing all these characters. And
right. Well, that's a different format of a one-man
show. Well,
show,
exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah. But I suppose the solo performer thing is taking more prevalence now. But I think it is costs, like you say, quite a bit.
It's partly cost, but it's partly because you can do anything in that format as well. I mean, you could do a set of characters, you could do a single narrative, you can do sort of a bio docudrama type piece. There's been some amazing. I don't know whether it's. I think it has always been there. I think people like Ken Campbell and Pip Utton, Carl McDermott, and some fantastic solo performers back in the 90s and the early 2000s, doing really interesting things with those performances. But yeah, I mean, if you're someone who's been doing stand-up comedy, and you think, well, where do I take this next? And, I like telling stories. I like being different characters. It's a good next step to something which is maybe your own sitcom with one of those characters or whatever you want to develop. But if you can do it for an hour or even 3 20-minute bits. I mean, I saw a great one a few years ago by Simon Farnaby, who's Horrible Histories, doing really interesting little individual characters, but it all tied together, and it was very much his narrative. So he's someone who is the perfect format for something like that. And the amazing women like Pippa Evans and Jo Neary, they just do tons and tons of little bits that all feed in. And Joanna's done Jo Neary's the later show is much more of a narrative piece, but before that it was lots of different characters.
Yes.
But and Rich Herring, for example, I mean, he started by doing the solo narrative pieces. Well, he did plays as well, and now he's going back into stand-up in a way. So but it's still storytelling. I think you're doing one person on the stage for an hour. You can do anything.
I think there is a crossover between the stand-up and storytelling, sort of more so. It's sometimes you can't even tell sort of what Rich Herring does, like you say. It can be almost viewed equally storytelling and comedy.
And then someone like Daniel Kitson does these, they're very much theatre as well. I mean, he does lighting, music and sound effects, and tells a story, but it's not in a sort of you couldn't really do it in a corner of a pub with a stand-up venue. It does involve theatre, and it does involve a level of attention that the theatre audience is more prepared to give to the performer and to the piece, and I think that's quite an interesting deal that gets made during those shows where if you can get up and go to the bar for a pint and then come back, and he's still telling a story. I mean, a lot of those solo comedy show stand up 1 hour, one man, one mic, you probably could do in a room like those rooms at the Stand at Edinburgh, for example. But if you sit in a theatre seat and the lights come down, the music comes up, and there's a set and there's a lighting effect, then it's very much a theatre mindset that has to get carried over between the performer and the audience.
Well, yes, you look at Kitson's stand-up shows, and he is telling stories in the same way, but like you say, the atmosphere and the feeling that surrounds a theatre show is something that's quite exciting and it gives a different flavour to it. And was that something that you were drawn to? It wasn't from stand-up you came from. Was it a love of the theatre for you?
A little bit. Well, I did sort of. I was in a double act at university with Al Murray, and we did a little bit on the London circuit, and it wasn't really enjoyable for me at all. And Al was finding his feet and was going that way, and I was going, no, I think I want to do something a bit different. And,
so it was a conflicting interest thing?
No, it was no real conflict. It was just different points of view about, particularly that thing about the attention, that if people could, people at a stand-up gig in a stand-up room give a different form of attention to the performer, and necessarily, I mean, that's the deal.
But you can't have a long, slow bit where nothing really happens.
You can't. Yeah. And also, I'm more interested in those bits where you can have a comedy payoff through dramatic, theatrical moments as well. So the first one-man show I did was in 1993 in Edinburgh. And it was sci-fi. It was crazy, very influenced by Ken Campbell and Michael Moorcock, and tons of sci-fi and weirdness and things like that. But it was very much a narrative piece. And, that's kind of the way developed over the 90s and into the 2000s.
Yes, I mean this show that you're doing, Sela, I always pronounce it wrong. Sela Camp, right? And this was in 2005. You did that.
Yeah.
You did one in 2008, didn't you?
Yep.
But then, has that been it, or have you
no, I'm working on a new one at the moment.
Okay.
But the one in 2008 it was called Not Everything Is Significant, and it requires certain big props and certain theatrical attention, certain staging for it to come over to an audience. It's very much one of those shows you can't really take on the road because each room's different, and you could take it on the road, but it would require a fair bit of setup and a lot of lugging props and hat stands and
it's what you were
Red
saying.
Indian headdresses and things like that. So the new one that I'm doing, almost finished the script of, is very much more self-contained, much easier. But again, it's even stranger and even darker. Not darker, but hopefully it's funny, but it's also got a lot of more of the quiet moments as well.
And that's something you're are you attracted to, doing something where people don't quite know where it's going, or an unusual bit? That tension in a room excites you rather than always wanting them on your side, maybe.
Well, I'm not worried about it, because I think if you create the right atmosphere and the right mood and the right connection with an audience, they'll go with you wherever you want to take them.
Okay.
So if you do say, don't worry, this is going to be a funny bit, then they'll come and they'll laugh. And don't worry, this is going to be a quiet bit, and but you need to know this because of the story. Then if the mood's right and if the room's okay and if they're coming with you, which they should, because
But then is it a struggle if they're not, if you're working against them?
I don't really necessarily feel that. I think you just sort of if you're confident in what you're doing, it doesn't matter. Even if a couple of people haven't quite come with you, well, don't worry, you just carry on and concentrate on the mood and the feeling.
I suppose with a theatrical piece like that, you can just sort of, it is a self-contained piece that you can just do.
Yeah.
I suppose you can carry on regardless, even if you're not quite getting the energy off the audience that you normally do.
Yeah, but I don't really mind that.
You
I don't know. I think an audience will decide what it thinks of a piece, and you can kind of tell by the quietness. That sounds ridiculous, but even if a joke doesn't go with a big laugh, if it sort of, a lot of my lines tend to be quite not complex, but they tend to need a little bit of thinking about, and they go, oh yeah, that's what that was about. So I get a second laugh almost on some of the things, but then some of the things, even if they don't laugh, I don't mind, because they'll have worked it out later, or even on the way home, or not at all, and that's fine too. And a lot of the things you are worried about, if they're laughing at that, then they might not come with you to the quieter, more serious, more poignant moments in the show. And I think you kind of need the balance between those two things. So I'm never worried if people don't guffaw or anything. I don't grade a show. I'm hard on myself on my performance, because I think, I could have done that a little bit more, I fluffed that line or whatever. But I don't grade an audience. I don't say, you're the worst audience you've ever. Oh man, why didn't you laugh at that? It's so funny. No,
I'm brilliant.
because what's the point? And also, they're there to enjoy themselves in their own way. And when you feel the weight of an applause at the end of a show, you kind of know how it's gone. And also by the faces of people going out, and when they come up to you in the bar afterwards, or if they wear your badge or whatever. But I'm not, because I don't consider myself as a comedian because I don't do the stand-up circuit or anything like that. I don't necessarily feel that everything is all to do with the instant reaction.
It's not always a yearning for laughter. People can be appreciating things on different levels, I guess.
But there are some great jokes as well.
Some brilliant jokes, yeah. So you've never done stand-up per se?
Well, I've flirted with it a bit, but I do club nights like Robin Ince's Bad Book Club, or Book Club, or School for Gifted Children, and I did bits at Club Zarathustra many years ago. So I've done, people can call me and say, "Oh, Ben, can you do something?" But it doesn't necessarily feel like stand-up for me. So I can do a reading from one of the shows from the book, or I can talk about a piece that I've written for a magazine and read that in a way, or do different things. But it's not men and women are very different, aren't they? Aren't they, everybody? I don't really do that.
You haven't tried to.
I don't think men and women are very different.
No.
So I think cats and dogs are very similar. So here's the thing: that wouldn't make me a very good stand-up. So I don't.
Although a stand-up can take. It can take a more storytelling form, like you say. It doesn't all have to be that.
Yeah, but then I think if you're doing it in that sense, then you have to have jokes and you have to have comedy wins along the way, and I don't necessarily think that's my stance.
Although I suppose what Stuart Lee is quite theatrical in a way, that kind of thing. And again, Kitson, what he does is quite theatrical.
Yeah. But I think we obviously write in different ways. And, I write in a certain way that, and I don't develop material in the same way.
Exactly. It's a sort of. So is it you write a show? It's sort of written and it's self-contained, and it might change a little bit, but it's not. Because some stand-ups will write and on stage almost. They won't really do a sit down thing and let's get this
they're very
out.
brave. I'm not so brave.
It's all there.
Yeah, I write and give it. I have an amazing director, Erica Wyman, who's now at Newcastle Playhouse, and fantastic lighting designer Malcolm Rippeth, and an amazing musician Simon Oakes. I give them the script and we work out where we need sound cues, and Erica will go, "Well, I think you need to." She might suggest cuts and edits and lines that aren't working, and then say, "Well, maybe work on it." But it is worked on in rehearsal rather than in performance. It's very rare that I'll do a preview show and change it at all between that and Edinburgh or whatever. But then saying that, I haven't done it for a while. But if I feel as though it's ready to go in front of an audience, it's pretty much. I mean, lines do change inevitably, and lines get cut. And I don't tend to ad lib, and I don't do. People don't heckle, but you kind of get the idea of what goes over and what works during those previews. But it doesn't really get changed that much.
Is the thing that excites you the idea behind a project, rather than sort of you're saying when you do the performance, it's quite self-contained and it's you've developed it in the rehearsal stage. Is that the bit that's exciting for you, the development of ideas, more so than the performance of them, and you're getting energy off performance all the time?
No, I mean I love the performance. Because it is different every night. There's no. I know it's a cliche, but it is every time it comes out in a different way, and people get different things from it, and people's response, people come up to me and say what shows have meant to them. I mean, the one I did in 2008, Not Everything is Significant, was very much a mystery. It was two characters that seem to be unconnected, and then there is a connection, and then we don't know quite what the connection is, and some people think it's a ghost story, some people think it's a man going through a nervous break, and all those interpretations are really interesting and valid, and that's kind of why it works as a theatre piece, and it sort of exists as a short story in the book as well. But I think it was written to be performed, to be in that moment. So you're there watching me play these two different parts, and are they the same person, or what's going on? And it's deliberately meant to be ambiguous there. So in the writing, the story, I always think, presents its own puzzles to you as a writer. You might start in the middle and go, well, why isn't it happening? Oh, maybe that needs to happen first. And you go, oh yeah, that's right. And then, well, if that happens first, then that needs to happen afterwards. So it kind of all fits together. It's like doing a jigsaw. So that's the exciting bit of the writing.
Right.
But in the performance, it's kind of, you get one chance to go into the audience's head and make that connection that night. So it doesn't necessarily have to be clear to them what the answer is, but you've got to present that excitement and that strangeness of the piece. I mean, for example, with Coelacanth, no, I don't have a point about that, sorry.
It's all right.
I wish I did. But the way that works, I sort of wanted to write a sports movie in a way, lovable loser, or battling again, will they become a winner? And, at the end, in a sports movie, they do become a winner. So I wanted to work a twist against that. I wanted to write a love story in there, but I also wanted to subvert that. And in fact, when you actually see the show, you realise it's not the story you think it is. It's actually a story about another situation. No spoilers. But it has all these layers and background details to do with trees, and to do with the fish, the coelacanth, the fish, and to do with love, and to do with family, and to do with England, and to do with tons and tons of other things. I know that sounds like there's tons in it, but I kind of like that about my shows, and the fact that
there's a lot of depth there.
I'd want that, because it's fine to do a show about your own experience of what happened to you on this thing as well, and but I'd prefer to be a fiction writer and to investigate a created world and look inside that world and see where it takes me as a writer.
That it's a sort of a creation, it's a creative, you're not looking within yourself and trying to be really confessional and really...
Well, inevitably there are things out of that as well. I mean, inevitably...
There are aspects of yourself.
Exactly. I mean, but it's not a cathartic, this happened to me, therefore I need to express this as this character. But weirdly, I'm sure I could go to an analyst and they'd say, yes.
It's all you.
I know. But I just kind of like telling weird, strange stories set in a world that's not quite the same, but because you understand the characters and you understand their motivations, you kind of go with it, and then you care about what happens. Because it would be easy to create a world and not
hyper-realistic.
But not necessarily connect with anything. So it's very important, and that helps with the music and the lighting and the direction as well. So although it's just me on stage telling that story, it's a collaboration between all those people.
And the performance for you is a fresh challenge every night, is it?
Yeah. We have sticks that fall over, we have line fluffs, we have sneezes. What can you do? I mean, you saw it last night. So, inevitably, it is. I mean, I did it at the Latitude Festival once in some woods, and we did it on the Friday afternoon, and it was nice. And we were booked again to do Saturday, sort of late morning, 11:30. And in the woods, me and the two musicians, the guys that played the music live, and I think there were about 30 or 40 people at the start, and then people slowly came in through the campsite into the woods and filled up because they could hear this music and see the storytelling, and the sunlight was coming through trees, and it was just one of those extraordinary experiences. And that was a very special moment. I've done it in the woods near Axminster, I've done it in an urban physic garden in London, I've done it in a whiskey distillery in Scotland. You can go anywhere, you can do it anywhere.
So it's exciting for you that the show can change, that it can be different.
Yeah.
It's not your want for it to be exactly the same every time.
No, that's a ridiculous want. I think,
But I would say some actors
do they
aim for that, maybe.
Well, good luck to them, but I think they'll be disappointed because inevitably it will be different each time. Because also, if you're doing it for the first time in a new room, things like the acoustic, things like the sight lines, things like the rake of the audience, I like to try and make eye contact, but you can't make eye contact with that person there and that person there at the same time, but you want to draw them in. It's going to be different.
It's in the moment. It's a sort of a feeling of spontaneity to an extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or still working with scripted stuff. I mean, you've done a lot of writing for TV and radio and things. Do you find that as rewarding, or is it really the stand-up shows that are your kind of real passion?
Passion's an odd word because you're passionate about everything you're doing at the time you're doing it. So I did a radio series in the 90s that was narrated by Oliver Postgate, the voice of Bagpuss, and we had amazing people in that show, and that was an extraordinary experience, and I loved doing that at the time. But I can listen to that now and think, I could have written that a little bit differently, so that's okay. And I did a sci-fi show recently for BBC, and I love doing that because sci-fi is my passion as well, so got to work with great people on that. And if you're not passionate about the job you're doing, you're trying to complete, then it's not going to be completed to the right level. So when I was writing that series in the 90s, it was like, this is the most, I'm so excited, I can put that in, I can do that. And
got to immerse yourself completely.
Yeah, of course you do.
Yeah.
And because I'm not doing the circuit, I'm not coming up with 6-10 minute material every week. It takes a while, but I still have to feel the passion for the work for a new show, or when I revive an old one as well.
And sort of taking the time over a project, I suppose that's something that you can do. You can sort of take a good length of time to make sure one thing is right, as opposed to having to keep steadily produce things.
No, in the 90s I did Edinburgh every year, so I did 93, 94, 96, 97, 98, 99, 2001.
And was that a good pressure at the time?
Kind of, yeah, but I was younger, and I was in that. It was the phase where you did Edinburgh every year in your 20s because you got so much energy, you got so much excitement and enthusiasm, and each show was very different from the last. Well, there was no material crossover, and each had a new title, a new story, a new narrative, and new effects, and it was great. But now, I don't feel under the same. It's not necessarily the right thing to do Edinburgh every year. If you kind of want to do it, you want to do it because it's a show you love.
You have a good idea.
Yeah, and also, it might have a bit of a future of some sort, or it's valuable in its own way. I love doing this show again because it's simple to take on the road because it's just me and the stick and the bowl, and it connects with people and it's nice to do. But I don't think you can rush things either. I think if the show's as good as it can be and it takes you 2 months to write, then that's the show.
That's fine.
If the show takes 2 years to write because you go, oh no, it's a bit like that, or oh no, everyone's doing that sort of thing now, so you kind of go, well, do I want to keep doing it, or do I want to change that, or what could be the next idea? So I do a lot of rewriting, a lot of mulling. A lot of writing is not writing. When you sit and write, you can be writing full time, but then a lot of it's just thinking, going,
it's what's going on in your head. Yeah,
maybe. And maybe not. So a lot of notebooks get lines crossed through it.
And sometimes that's an important bit later on, maybe, or it's a whole big creative process.
Well, sometimes you look back and you go, what does that mean?
What was I thinking?
duck on head. Okay.
But it's nice to be coming back to a show that, I mean, because 7 years is a long time.
Well, I've been doing this since the book came out in 2009. So
Okay.
for the book launch, and I did the Edinburgh Literary Book Festival and a few other book festivals in 2009. Did a couple in 2010, maybe one last year, and sort of 6 or 7 this year as well.
But I suppose it's a nice thing with a theatrical piece. You can come back to it perhaps a bit more readily.
Oh yeah,
because it's an existing piece that you can
absolutely.
just take on the road.
Still got the stick in the bowl. They go everywhere.
Well, thank you very much, Ben.
Was that it?
It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And good luck with all the rest of your
Thank you, what a delight.
little tour.
Enjoy more coffees,
More coffee.
more comedians.
Thanks.